Welcome to the Behind the Lens series. In this video, we'll be looking at the Sony E PZ 18-110. This lens is a Super 35 APS-C native E-mount zoom lens with a constant f4 aperture whose zoom range will cover you in almost all shooting situations.
Mark.
The Sony 18-110 is what I would call a hybrid zoom. It has some of the features you would find on a cinema zoom, like smooth iris control, parfocal focusing, and the ability to have fully manual focus zoom and iris rings. But it also has some electronic features that often come in handy, like a zoom servo, auto iris and autofocus capabilities, and optical steady shot. This lens feels a lot like working with the EX3 lens, yet on a Super 35 sensor. The focus ring is switchable from manual focus to autofocus/manual focus, and you can engage this by clicking the focus ring forward. Now when you're in manual focus mode, you have hard stops from 3.1 feet to infinity. This is great if you need to repeat your focus moves or take marks on the lens. When you engage the autofocus mode, you lose those hard stops, but the minimum focus drops down, so you basically have a macro mode. So at the wide end of the lens, that minimum focus drops down to 1.3 feet. And at the tight end of the lens, it goes back to the original 3.1 feet. So this is great if you need to get those close focus shots. Something to be aware of though is when you're switching back and forth between the two modes, going from hard stops to no hard stops, your focus indicators are not going to line up. I mentioned that this lens is parfocal, and that's technically true. But because it's an electronically controlled lens, I found that if you do a fast snap zoom, there's actually a lag in the focusing. So what happens is the beginning of the shot and the end of the shot will be in focus. But as you move through the focal range, it actually goes out of focus for a second. So this is something to be aware of if you're doing those fast snap zooms. While this lens doesn't have a servo grip, it does actually have a built-in small zoom rocker on the side of the lens that you can engage by clicking the servo switch. This is great if you need to have smooth, steady in-camera zooms. The lens comes with a removable shade that can also act as a front lens cap. It also has a detachable lens support, which is great if you're using this lens with smaller cameras. The lens has very pleasing color rendition. It's relatively neutral with a slight lift in the skin tones. It also has nice contrast. If you're looking for nice, pleasing bokeh with this lens, unfortunately you're going to be disappointed. In this shot with the autofocus cafe lights, you can see there's sharp, jagged edges to the bulb, 7 to be exact, which is the same number of iris blades in the lens. We shot this wide open, which normally yields the smoothest bokeh of any aperture. We wanted to see how this lens flares, but it's actually pretty flare resistant. At both the wide and the tight end, there's a sharp star pattern around the light. At the wide end, there's a minimal flare trail with basically no color to it. At the tight end, there's a little bit more color and character to the flare, but overall I find the flares pretty boring. The Sony E PZ 18-110 is a great all-around zoom lens when you need the functionality of a hybrid zoom and you want to avoid lens changes. When I'm shooting with this lens, I feel like I'm going back to the days of an all-inclusive video camera, which isn't a bad thing. This is a perfect lens choice if you're shooting weddings, events, or corporate interviews when you need a lens that ticks all the boxes. The lens has pleasing color rendition and contrast. It has a great minimum focus distance, especially in AF mode, and the lack of breathing is impressive. But the bokeh is jagged and the lens flares are sharp and boring. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the companion blog post, where we have not only deeper insight into the lens, but also sample videos for you to look at as well. Thanks so much for watching the Behind the Lens series, and be sure to check out all the other videos.